Alan Wake 2, Remedy Entertainment's long-awaited and highly anticipated sequel to 2010's Alan Wake, finally arrived on October 27, 2023. The game was met with critical acclaim, scoring an 89 on Metacritic based on 75 reviews, and that was followed up by a still impressive 85 user score. The game released on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. I'm Mental9R, and this is a Caffeine Entertainment game review. Despite positive reception and positive reviews, Alan Wake 2 failed to meet Remedy's sales expectations. As of November 2024, the game has sold roughly 1.8 million copies. According to reports, however, the development and marketing budget was in the range of 77 million, and unfortunately for Remedy Entertainment, this means it has yet to turn a profit. A possible explanation for the lower than expected sales could be due to a controversial PC release. For better or worse, Remedy decided to make Alan Wake 2 an Epic Games storefront exclusive. Yes, that means it's not available on PC's biggest platform, Steam. Without a doubt, this decision would have definitely affected the overall sales. The reality is, a lot of people refuse to purchase games outside of good old games and Steam. This attitude is so prevalent, in fact, it has led to the likes of Ubisoft, for example, to return to Steam in an effort to boost their sales. This after pulling their games in favor of their own storefront years ago. Personally, I did buy it on Epic, and I've now played both the PC and PlayStation 5 versions. For this review, I'll be focusing on my experience on PlayStation 5. Alan Wake 2 picks up 13 years after the original, with Alan still trapped in the dark place. On that note, if you haven't played Alan Wake recently, I highly recommend playing through the first game prior to playing Alan Wake 2. As mentioned, I played this game on both PC and PS5. When I played it on PC, it had been 13 years since I'd last played Alan Wake. As a result, there was a lot of plot pieces that I didn't remember from the first game that actually connect up in the second one. Moving back to Alan Wake 2, in contrast to the original Alan Wake where you played Alan the entire time. In Part 2, you'll split your time as both Alan and FBI agent Saga Anderson. As Alan, your focus is to escape the dark place. As Saga, you'll be working with your partner Alex Casey, investigating a series of ritualistic murders centered once again around the town of Bright Falls. As you move back and forth between Alan in the dark place and Saga in the real world, the story slowly but surely becomes more and more intertwined. Occasionally, the stories will overlap directly between Saga and Alan through a form of telepathy in Saga's mind place, but more on that later. A little side note too, the game also links into Remedy's Control, so playing through that one first will give you a little bit more insight to the FBC before they make their inevitable appearance in Alan Wake 2. Visually, Alan Wake 2 is one of the best looking games I've played. It's not without some issues on PS5. You'll see some graphical artifacts occasionally, but for the most part, it's a decent presentation on the console. I think the most impressive moments for me were in the forested areas in the rain. The movement of the vegetation as the wind blows is impressive and adds to the level of immersion. The use of lighting effects is impressive as well. Overall, I'd give the graphical presentation an A. Really amazing stuff from Remedy. When we start talking about the performance, however, things are a little less stellar here. For me, I noticed fairly regular frame drops, especially in the outdoor areas in the middle of a lot of action. At no point did it really impact my ability to play the game successfully, but it's definitely noticeable. So if you're looking for a locked 60 Hz, you won't find it here. The bright side is, however, the game is very stable, at least at the time I played it, and I didn't experience any crashes or major issues of any kind. I did mention that I've played this game on my PC as well. And with my rig running a 7800X3D CPU combined with a 4090 GPU, it's a pretty massive step up over the PS5. Honestly though, no one should be surprised by this. I'm much more surprised by how well the PS5 does, especially when considering how much more powerful my PC is, if that makes any sense. So credit to Remedy, the PS5 version is surprisingly good considering the hardware that it's running on. One more thing, I normally don't use the primary internal drive with my PS5. I install everything on my secondary NVMe. This is the first game that I've actually had some strange behavior in while doing that. For some bizarre reason, having the game installed on my secondary NVMe would cause some stutter during travel cutscenes when you move between different areas in the game. The audio would also go out of sync. However, moving my game to the built-in internal drive suddenly solved this issue. It's not a big deal though, but just odd that this would happen considering the NVMe that I installed in my PlayStation 5 is technically a bit faster than the one that I had the game installed on in my PC. And when I played it on PC, I never experienced any of these types of issues. Like Alan Wake Remastered, 3D audio in Alan Wake 2 was very effective. I found that I could easily determine where enemies were based on the audio in the game. I found the audio deep, immersive, and rich in quality. It did a great job of adding to the atmosphere of the game. Voice acting in Alan Wake 2 was excellent as well. I don't have much else to say here. I didn't find that any of the characters seemed out of place or disjointed. In other words, none of them pulled me out of the game because of a lackluster performance, which is obviously a good thing. Oh, and I almost forgot, the old gods of Asgard make a triumphant return in Alan Wake 2, too. The DualSense controller was well utilized in Alan Wake 2. Just like in Silent Hill 2, the remake, you could feel the nuances of the terrain, along with the rain hitting your back. Well done on that front. The adaptive triggers were also well used, although if I'm perfectly honest, for the most part, I don't think about them while I'm playing. So how useful that is, for me, is debatable. I guess the main thing is, they aren't intrusive to the point where I feel I need to disable them. Honestly, in previous console generations, disabling vibration was one of the first things I did, especially in PvP modes, as I found it incredibly distracting. I have to give Sony their props here. Before I owned a PS5, I thought I'd be disabling all this stuff, but I've never felt the need to do it with the DualSense. It's just a subtle addition to the game that doesn't become a distraction at any point. I complained a bit about the controls in Alan Wake Remastered feeling dated, but I have no such complaints with Alan Wake 2. Everything about it feels a bit more connected and modern, as it should. As a result, the gameplay felt responsive and easy to settle into. Like Alan Wake 2 also rewards exploring the environment and solving the puzzles you encounter. In particular, you'll find campsites and the like that have the ability to alter your reality. You solve the puzzle, and you can go find rewards that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. There's also a weapons upgrade mechanic that comes into play via finding hidden items as you play through the game. The other interesting component of the game is the use of Saga's Mind Place, as I mentioned previously. It's here where you'll piece together the clues you find in the game that lead you through the story. It's also the place where you'll perform upgrades to your weapons. For me, I'm still on the fence as to how I feel about it, but I will say they tied it into the game in such a way that it's necessary. Should it be necessary? I'll leave that up to you to decide, but for me, it wasn't my favorite part of the gameplay. Another interesting mechanic is how you can switch between the real world playing as Saga and the dark place playing as Alan Wake, and how the actions in both places are interlinked to some extent. Now don't get me wrong, you can't just change back and forth at any time. There's specific location on the maps where you need to be in order to do that. Ultimately though, you're on two different quests at the same time, one to solve the mysteries of the Cult of the Tree, and the other to escape the dark place. In between, there's a story being written in the dark place that ties into the reality of the real world. I enjoyed that aspect of the game, without a doubt. In terms of replay value, I guess that depends on you. I've played through the game twice now, with around a year in between both playthroughs, and I did enjoy it both times. There's only one ending though, as far as I know, and my second playthrough was part of me wanting to run through both the first and second Alan Wakes prior to hitting up the Lake House expansion. I'm glad I took that path. Playing through the first game again really filled in those blanks in the second game, and there were certainly points that made a lot more sense because of it. So, where does that leave us? Alan Wake 2 is a technical achievement on the visual front. There were so many times I paused and just looked at the beauty of the environment, especially the outdoor scenes, as mentioned previously. On my first playthrough on PC, I remember calling my wife over and saying, "You gotta see this." As for the meat and potatoes of the game, it's a great game. I enjoyed the vast majority of both my playthroughs. That said, there were also a few moments that I could have done without. In particular, there's a sequence where Alan Wake is working his way through the dark place, and there's some bastardized version of a music video playing on the walls. That went on a little long for my tastes, but other than that, there really wasn't anything else that I really wished was done differently. So, the bottom line, I'm giving Alan Wake 2 an 85 out of 100. As I said, it's a great game, and I believe fans of psychological horror will find it very entertaining. The story ties in very well to the first Alan Wake, and because of that, I highly recommend you play through the first one too, although it's not required. The game is a lot of fun, and it can also be found at pretty significantly discounted prices these days, especially on sales events. So personally, I'd wait for a great deal on it, then jump in with both feet. Well, that's all I've got for you. Thanks so much for joining me today for my take on Alan Wake 2. If you stayed with me this long, I'd greatly appreciate it if you drop a like, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and follow if you're on Rumble. And maybe share this video out with a few of your friends. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. Once again, I'm Mental9R, this is Caffeine Entertainment, and don't forget, it's time to wake up and play some games.